Hello everyone and welcome to my review, the first of 3 films I will tackle by Mamoru Hosoda, which is The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. Now before I begin my review, I want to say one thing. I am aware this is a loose adaptation of the novel of the same name, but this is my opinion of the film based on its own merits and not on how closely it follows the novel, especially since some has said this is a semi-sequel to the novel. Now that said, let's talk about the film, shall we? So the plot follows a high school student named Makoto Kono who is having the worst day ever, ranging from sleeping in, which results her being late to school, to failing miserably on a pop quiz, and even nearly causing a fire while trying to make tempura in cooking class. After school, before she was going to play baseball with her best friends Kosuke Suda and Chiaki Bamiya, she has an out-of-body experience after accidentally landing on a strange nut-shaped thing. While playing some catch with Kosuke and Chiaki, Makoto heads over to the Tokyo Metropolitan Museum where her aunt works to give her some peaches when the brakes on her bike failed and she looks to have crashed into the path of an oncoming train, but somehow while being sent flying, she has somehow went back before not only the elves play their song, but also before the train arrives. Her aunt reveals to her that she has the ability to time leap, which is common for girls around her age to experience, and of course at first she doesn't believe it. However, after testing it out and discovering it works, she decides to use it to make her days better. Now we are to question, where did that strange nut thing come from, and will there be any consequences to Makoto time leaping? That's all the plot mentions. Now it's time for me to say what I liked about The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, what I did not like about The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, some trivia, my overall opinion on the film. Okay, so what did I like about The Girl Who Leapt Through Time? The animation by Studio Madhouse is excellent. The movement between the human characters is very fluent, and the time leap sequences are so well detailed. One example is I like the concept on the time leap sequences because I thought how it looked like a massive place with gears constantly moving and an endless stream of different times was pretty innovative. The dubbing by Ocean Productions I think is overall solid. Emily Hurst I felt delivered the needed spunk to Makoto's personality, and when the scene is emotional I could buy what the character is feeling. Plus I could buy the friendship Makoto has with Chiaki and Kosuke because I felt she had pretty good chemistry with both Andrew Francis and Alex Zahara. Andrew Francis, I liked how he could make Chiaki a jokester in one scene, and then the next scene he could be super serious, and I felt he made the transition believable. Plus, I could buy his feelings towards Makoto, and I felt he nailed the laid-back attitude to Chiaki's personality. Alex Zahara, I don't have a lot to say other than I thought he was pretty good as Kosuke, and that I could not only buy as he's smart, but also the friendship he has with Makoto and Chiaki, since I felt he had decent chemistry with both Emily Hurst and Andrew Francis. There are other people that mentioned like Natalie Walters as a classmate of Makoto, Chiaki, and Kosuke as well as a member of the volunteer club Kaho Fujitani, Saffron Henderson as Makoto's aunt Kazuko Yoshiyama, Kirsty Martz as one of Makoto's friends Yuri Hayakawa, and even Shannon Chan Kent as Makoto's younger sister Miyuki Kono. But really, aside from saying they did overall solid jobs, I really don't have much to add about the English dub that wouldn't be a repeat of what I said about the main cast. As for the Japanese version, I feel the best word to describe it is authentic. What I mean by that is the actors sound the appropriate age that the characters are. And while there is one minor thing I'll bring up later, I feel as a whole it was quite good. Risa Naka I thought was for the most part very good as Makoto. Like Emily Hurst, I thought she gave the needed spunk to her personality, but I can not only buy her performance when a serious scene happens, but I can also believe the friendship she has between Kosuke and Chiaki, because I thought she had very good chemistry with Takeo Ishida and Mitsutake Itakura. Takeo Ishida's Chiaki, I don't have a lot to say other than like Andrew Francis, I thought he delivered the jokingly side as well as the laid-back side to Chiaki's personality quite well. But when the part was serious, he pulled out the dramatic elements pretty well. Lastly, I could buy his feelings towards Makoto, and I felt he had good chemistry with Mitsutake Itakura and especially with Risa Naka. Mitsutake Itakura, I don't have a lot to add other than he pulled off the intelligence of Kosuke very well, and because I thought he had good chemistry with Risa Naka and Takeo Ishida, I could buy Kosuke's friendship with Makoto and Chiaki. And Sachihara I thought was very good as Makoto's aunt Kazuko Yoshiyama, or as Makoto calls her Auntie Witch, because I felt she was very good in that she made her wisdom believable whenever she was trying to help out Makoto in a situation, whether it's about time leaping or her feelings towards her friends whenever she would visit the Tokyo Metropolitan Museum. There are other people mentioned like Ayami Kakiuchi as Makoto's friend Yuri Hayakawa, Mizuki Tanimura as Kaho Fujitani, and even Yuki Sakido as Makoto's younger sister Miyuki Kono, but really, aside from saying they all gave solid performances, I really don't have a lot left to say that wouldn't be a repeat of what I've already said about the main cast. The music by Kiyoshi Yoshida, while it wasn't used a lot, it was more kept in reserve. I felt made great use of the piano and string instruments because I felt they helped make the scenes that more powerful, with a good example being when Makoto discovers Chiaki is dating her friend Yuri. Plus the songs they used, particularly the ending credit song, I found to be both extremely catchy, and I thought the lyrics fit perfectly with the events that happened in the movie. The characters I found to not only be likable, but also believable as well. I know some people have said Makoto is a bit brash or overconfident, but I think that's what makes her a teenager. And I know some of you are probably thinking, what do I mean by that? Well, let's think about it. If you were given the power to leap through time as a teenager, chances are you would have a sense of overconfidence in that you would think you could accomplish just about anything. And more than likely would be short-sighted that you would have the mindset of what you're doing in the moment, but not thinking about how it may affect people around you in the long run. And if something goes wrong, no biggie, you could just go back and fix the problem, which is exactly how Makoto acted when she discovers her powers at first. But when she sees the consequences of her time leaping firsthand, she tries to correct it, and we see that she genuinely cares about her friends. Another example is Chiaki, who has a reputation of transferring from different schools, which led people to suspect a variety of reasons that put him in a negative light. But when you get to know him, sure, he jokes around with Makoto and Kosuke, as what most high school friends would do, but at the same time, he wouldn't hesitate to stand up for his friends. Lastly, the overall story I think is really well told and well paced. Sure, I can see why some people might find it hard to follow, which, to be fair, a lot of time travel movies can be guilty of that. But I liked how they balanced humor, like when Makoto tries to get Kosuke and Kaho together, after when Kaho reveals to Makoto her feelings towards Kosuke, to showing the serious unintentional consequences of her time leaping, which I'm glad they showed us the consequences, rather than have a character spell it out to the audience. One part that really stands out is after Makoto switches places with a classmate in cooking class, which results in him being picked on by a bunch of bullies, and one day he snaps and not only hoses the bullies with a fire extinguisher, but chucks it at Makoto, which she time leaps after Chiaki stepped in the way to take the full front of the chucked fire extinguisher to push him out of the way, which results in a good friend of Makoto, Yuri, getting hit on the shoulder by it. And just the way this scene is set up, as well as Makoto's facial reaction, I felt is more powerful and shows the unintentional consequence of her time leaping better than any dialogue could, because it's not only more emotional, but it also follows the age-old rule of show, don't tell. Another example I felt was handled extremely well because of facial expressions and not because of someone explaining it to us is when Makoto first discovers she has feelings towards Chiaki and has a complete breakdown. I felt that scene was so emotionally powerful because of Makoto's facial and emotional expression as well as how the scene was set up. Plus, there is a twist near the end, and while I won't give it away for an obvious reason, I felt it was handled so well. While there are a lot of positives to The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, is there anything I did not like about The Girl Who Leapt Through Time? Well, I do have one complaint, but it is so ridiculously minor that it doesn't even come remotely close to breaking the film for me. My lone complaint, this is a definite nitpick, but there were reactions in the Japanese version I felt should have gotten a second take. One example is Makoto's reaction in the beginning when she sees what time it is and is late for school. I felt it's not all that convincing, but I found this complaint to be extremely minor because as the film went along, I felt the cast were more comfortable in their roles and their performances was much better as a result. But like I said earlier, this is a big time nitpick that doesn't even remotely break the film for me. Now for some trivia. From what I gather, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time is a loose adaptation of the 1967 novel of the same name by Yasutaka Susui, who is one of the most famous science fiction authors of Japan. But I've also seen sources that say it's a semi-sequel taking place 20 years after the events of the novel. Also, coincidentally, this isn't the first anime adaptation of his novels, as in the same year there was an anime adaptation of his 1993 novel Paprika, which was directed by the late Satoshi Kon, who you might know for directing Perfect Blue, Millennium Actress, and Tokyo Godfathers. Lastly, if that wasn't enough, months before the film's release, there was a manga created where apparently Makoto has a dream where she meets the younger version of her aunt, Kazuko Yoshiyama, who is the protagonist of the novel. When the movie was released, it was only shown in a small number of theaters, and it made about 300 million yen, which as far as American money goes, translates to about $3 million. And it wasn't advertised as much as some of the other animated films that were being released at the time, most notably Studio Ghibli's Tales from Earthsea. The word of mouth and positive reception sparked interest, and at places like the Theater Shinjuku, for days in a row, moviegoers would fill the theater, even stand to see it. And as a result, the distributor, Kadokawa Pictures, took unprecedented measures to not only show The Girl Who Leapt Through Time in more theaters, but also sending it to several international film festivals as well. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time is the first winner of the newly created Best Animated Feature Award at the Japan Academy Prize, which is basically Japan's version of the Academy Awards. According to the audio commentary from the Japanese cast and director Mamoru Hosoda, they actually recorded the original audio in order from the beginning, and the only part they really did not do in order was the final scene because they wanted to accommodate Mizuki Tanimura's schedule. Plus, they secretly recorded a 6th day so Takeo Ishida could do one specific scene. Also, everyone showed up for the first session where they met for the first time, and the voice recording took 5 straight days to do. 6 if you're counting the secret take with Takeo Ishida. As I mentioned, the director of this film is Mamoru Hosoda, who also directed the first 2 Digimon movies, which is Digimon Adventure and Digimon Adventure Our War Game, the 6th One Piece movie Baron Omatsuri and the Secret Island, and he was even a key animator for the first 2 Dragon Ball Z Broly movies, the Dragon Ball movie The Path to Power, Sailor Moon S The Movie, and even the Yu Yu Hakusho movie Poltergeist Report. Lastly, he was even at one point commissioned to direct the Academy Award-nominated film adaptation of Howl's Moving Castle, but he left early in the film's production. Some of the other roles that cast the English dub were in includes Emily Hurst, who from what I can see made minor appearances in shows and movies like Smallville, Blade the Series, X-Men 2, X-Men United, and even the TV movie Battlestar Galactica Razor. Andrew Francis, who also played Dende from the Ocean dub of Dragon Ball Z, Genkai Sakura from Monster Rancher, Shining Armor from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and even Bobby Drake or Iceman from X-Men Evolution. Alex Zahara, who from what I can see is not only a comedian, but he also made brief appearances in movies like 2012 and The 13th Warrior, and he even played King Midas from the hit ABC series Once Upon a Time, Saffron Henderson, who you might know as Shenhua from Black Lagoon, Gohan from the Ocean dub of Dragon Ball Z, Callisto from X-Men Evolution, and she even played Kurenai in an episode of Naruto. Lastly, as far as the English dub goes, we have Shannon Chan Kent, who also played Misa from not only the Death Note anime TV series, but also the dubbing for the first 2 live-action Death Note movies. And she even does the singing voice for Pinkie Pie from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. As for the Japanese version, some of the other roles that cast in includes Risa Naka, who from what I gather played Yumi Junichi from Summer Wars. She did the dubbing voice of Chun-Li from Street Fighter The Legend of Chun-Li, as well as Sakura, which is the Japanese name of Rochelle from Disney's Planes. And this wasn't the only version where she played the protagonist in a film version of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, as she played Akira Yoshiyama from the 2010 adaptation of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time titled Time Traveler, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, which was apparently the sequel to the 1983 film adaptation. Mitsutake Takura, from what I can see, made minor appearances in shows and movies like Summer Wars, Kekkaishi, and the recent Lupin the Third series The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, Mitsuki Tanimura, who also played Cosmo from Summer Wars, and she has even appeared in not only Wolf Children, but she even played Lotta Hart from the live-action film adaptation of Phoenix Wright. Lastly, we have Fumihiko Tachiki, who has played a number of voices including Kenpachi Zaraki from Bleach, Gendo Ikari from not only the Neon Genesis Evangelion series, but also the movies including the recent films, Bunji Kugashira from Gungrave, and even Don Krieg from One Piece. Overall, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time I feel is an incredibly underrated film. In fact, I might even go as far as to say it's my top 5 most underrated films because I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this film, which is a real shame because I think this is a great animated film. The animation is really good. The characters I found to not only be wonderfully likable, but also believable. It's well scored. And I feel the story is not only creative, but I also felt like it balanced humor and drama extremely well. And what complaint or complaints I had are so unbelievably minor that it doesn't come close to ruining my enjoyment of the film. And I wish over time it gets more attention than it currently has, which I think it deserves. I give The Girl Who Leapt Through Time 4 stars out of 4 and a 9 out of 10. So that's my review of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. If you want to express your opinions on this film, you are more than welcome to, but please be mature about it. Any bashing and or personal attacks on anybody will be removed the minute I see them. You'll be blocked on the spot, which is the last thing I want to do to anyone. So that's my review of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. I hope you all have a nice day, and not only that, but see you all next time as I look at the second of 3 films by Mamoru Hosoda I will review, which is on Summer Wars.
Hey everyone, Michael here. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, I am still currently working on my review script for my movie review of Marvel's The Avengers. And in fact, a majority of my pros and cons of my review script is done, so it is getting closer to the prototype being completed. Now, how long it will be before the video is uploaded is something I simply can't answer. It might happen sometime next week, but I wouldn't hold your breath just yet, so there is no set date. Anyways, I felt like doing something special for the time being, which is doing a special audio commentary of my review of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, and production-wise, this was an interesting review. From a script perspective, I actually felt like this was one of my best reviews, and I was proud of it, but what was disappointing was, if you saw the original version, you would see the footage was vibrating, which there is a story behind this. For those that are curious where I get the footage from, most of the time I use a long since obsolete software called DVD Shrink, and depending on the situation, Handbrake, though the last 3 reviews it has not worked, so I've actually been recording the footage through VLC Media Player. When I was on this review, this was the second review where I used the usual software, DVD Shrink, the first being my review of Akira, and at the time I didn't know that putting the footage on Windows Live Movie Maker would make the footage, well, not vibrate, so I was simply working with what I had. Though the one picture being blurry, I will admit I had no excuse for, and I should have picked a better picture while I was making the first review. So while I was working on my review of Summer Wars and I tested out the footage, which is where I made that discovery, and I decided to fix up my original Girl Who Leapt Through Time review, which took me like 5 to 6 hours to complete, because it wasn't just getting the footage, but also making it frame to frame accurate as the original video. I feel the best thing since I've used footage for my reviews is that now when I present a point and or example, I can now show what I'm talking about, rather than just praying to gods on Google or Yahoo, because I don't want to be limited. For those that are curious, how did I come across this film? This is bad of me to say, but I first saw it on YouTube, since I usually am stubborn and will try to support the official release the best I can. So when I finally got around seeing The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, I loved the film so much that I wanted to not only review this film, but also, if possible, try to get a DVD copy of the film. And when I saw it, I also owned a Blu-ray DVD combo of Summer Wars, and his latest film called Wolf Children was going to be released in the United States in the winter of 2013, so I figured why not tackle the films by Mamoru Hosoda, since I felt it was fitting because I remember some people calling him the next Hayao Miyazaki, and I felt it would be appropriate to go from every Hayao Miyazaki film at the time I made those videos, to then be talking about the person who many say is the next Miyazaki. In October of 2013, I actually got a good used DVD copy of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time on Amazon for $60, not counting shipping and handling, which most of the time I would say is a ripoff, but considering at the time when I got it, getting a new copy was like $115, and while there were used copies that are cheaper, they were pretty much former library copies, so I felt like it was a bargain. Since then, I am glad I got it when I did, because when I went to ASEN, which for those that don't know what ASEN is, it's short for Anime Center, which is the anime convention that is down in Rosemont. I found a new copy of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time for I believe it was like $93 to $98, and I actually checked Amazon last night, and if you live in North America, there's only 2 used copies, and both are almost $140, not counting shipping and handling, and depending on where you live, taxes. Having said all that, I am aware that in the United Kingdom, getting a copy of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time is ridiculously cheap down there, so it should be a lot easier for you to find a copy of that movie. If anyone is going to ask me why is this movie so rare to find in North America, I personally think it's because the original distributor for this film, Bandai Entertainment, went under, I want to say it was like 3 years ago. So we do have that, and to my knowledge, no distribution company has picked it up since, which I feel is a real shame because I do feel like this movie is incredibly underrated and deserves more attention than it currently gets. I'm sure a lot of people notice this now, but nowadays I don't use transitions as frequently as I used to, and I more wanted to keep it in reserve, Like when I talk about the acting and I mention an actor or actress, I use the star and or stars transition, and though I've forgotten to do this lately, when I talk about story I use a page turn transition, which the logic behind doing that transition was it would be like turning the page of a book. And I wanted to make the use of these transitions make sense, and looking back, I think it works better than throw one every few seconds, which was the case in my older reviews from 2011 to 2013. When I was presenting examples for my points, there was a few I knew I was going to use. Like when I mentioned the music and how they used piano, I knew the scene that best demonstrated this was when Chiaki was talking to Makoto's friend Yuri, which the scene was set up like they were becoming a couple, and I especially liked that there was no dialogue in the scene, and through facial expressions, you could see, most notably Makoto, what she was feeling and or thinking. When it came to mentioning the humor, I felt the best example to use was when Makoto was trying to get Kaho and her friend Kosuke together, and one reason or another it fails. And as for how so, I feel it's hard to describe it other than I suggest you see not just this movie, but also that scene itself to see why I ultimately chose as an example for the humor in this film. I do feel like they perfectly showed how a teenager would handle having an ability like time traveling, or in this case, time leaping, which is more than likely you would not only abuse the ever-loving crap out of it, but also have a sense of overconfidence in that you would feel like you could do just about anything, and if something went awry, the time leaping would solve all of your problems. And I really dug the character of Makoto, because she felt like a real teenage girl in a coming-of-age and or sci-fi setting to me. And yes, I will admit, the scene where she lands on the strange walnut-shaped thing and gets the ability to time leap is easily one of the trippiest things I have ever witnessed on film, animation, or live action. Furthermore, I felt they showed the unintentional consequences of time leaping very well, with the most effective scene is the example I used in my review, where a classmate of Makoto completely snaps and gets back at some bullies by hosing them with a fire extinguisher and actually chucks it at Makoto, which hit her friend Yuri after she time leaped to push Chiaki out of the way after he got in front of her to take the hit. And like with the music part, when you saw the aftermath of that scene, Makoto's face and the classmate's reaction in the background, it showed you everything you needed to see and hear, and I personally felt it was paced extremely well, and the scene itself, I think, was very powerful. When it came to the Japanese version, when I saw it to make this review, I don't know what it was, but the opening scenes felt flat to me. Maybe it's because I don't speak Japanese, and while I try my best to pronounce things, I tend to think I'm not that great at Japanese, but it felt like they needed at least one more take, and I fully admit this was a nitpick, because I remember noticing it for just the beginning, and then the cast felt much more comfortable in the roles as the film went along. When it came to the trivia to this movie, I will admit, like with Kazuo Cagliostro, I was mostly limited to what I could find. But unlike Kazuo Cagliostro, the DVD had an audio commentary from director Mamoru Hosoda, Risa Naka, who voiced Makoto, and Taki Yoshida, who voiced Chiaki. And I found it interesting that they actually mostly recorded the scenes from beginning to end, and with the exception of the twist, the only scene they did out of order was to accommodate for the Japanese actors who voiced Kaho's schedule. To add to this, while I was aware it was apparently a loose adaptation of the novel of the same name, which I believe is through Wikipedia, so you could tell how reliable I am. But anyways, I heard apparently some people say it's a quasi-sequel to the novel, since the name of Makoto's aunt was the name of the main protagonist in the novel, and it was where I saw, I guess they made a manga where Makoto meets the younger version of her aunt. When I looked up other novels and or books the author did, I was very surprised that he also wrote Paprika, and I don't know if you could call this a huge coincidence or what, but both the anime film versions of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time and Paprika were released the same year, which was 2006. To add to this, before anyone asks, yes, I do own a DVD copy of Paprika, No, I have not got around seeing it yet, but I eventually will, as well as every Satoshi Kon film that has been released in North America, and I do plan on making a video review on all 4 films, which, with the case of his first film, Perfect Blue, is actually a request. And I won't be counting the film he was making that is planned to be released posthumously, because last time I checked, there has been next to no set date, much less any news on that project.
Also, everyone showed up for the first session where they met for the first time, and the voice recording.
When it came to looking for other roles to cast the English dub were in, I mostly had to scrap and scrounge for material. There was not much for me to work with, especially with the girl who played Makoto, Emily Hurst, who the best I could find was minor roles in shows and or movies like X-Men 2, Battlestar Galactica, and Smallville with no real character I could find at the time. I do want to apologize for botching the pronunciation of Shen Ho's name. At the time I was recording, I didn't get very far in Black Lagoon, so I wasn't introduced to the character, and I ultimately went with how it was spelled, and looking back, I should have tried to look online to see how it was actually pronounced. And as I look back at this review, I really should have fixed that blunder, and again, I wish to apologize for completely butchering the name of a character. Now, on a side note, if anyone was to ask me my thoughts on Black Lagoon, it's very juvenile when it comes to the use of foul language, and it is excessively violent, so it's obviously not a series for the kiddies. To add to that, the beginning of the second half got ridiculous with the incestual vampire twins, and yes, you heard that right. But still, even with that said, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's one of the rare instances where I feel the English dub is even better than the Japanese version, and what's even more interesting was Ocean did the dubbing for the series, which was the same company that dubbed The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. I also was surprised when I looked up other roles Saffron Henderson was in, that she actually did the voice for Kurenai Yui for one episode of Naruto, before she was replaced by Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who, in case some of you don't know, I believe is the ADR director for the English dub of the Naruto franchise, but if I got it completely wrong, feel free to tell me in the comments. I also found it interesting that the person who played Kaho Fujitani, Mitsuki Tanimura, would also appear in Mamoru Hosoda's next film, Summer Wars, as Cosma, and how she got the role is interesting in and of itself. I will say too, with Summer Wars, I could definitely see why people say it's the remake to the Digimon movie Our War Game, but I'm not alone when I say I think it handled that story better than the Digimon movie. When it came to overall, I think I still stand by my rating because I felt it was a great anime film, and I wish that over time it gets more attention, which I personally feel it deserved. The animation by Madhouse, even though the movie is 9 years old as I'm recording this, I think still looks great even to this very day. Heck, even the out-of-body experience where Makoto gets the ability to time leap, as trippy as that scene is, visually, I think it looks amazing. Character-wise, I think Makoto makes this movie work, and while the supporting characters aren't the most developed, I remember getting the impression they felt like real people. The voice work, even with my small nitpick on the Japanese version, is still great, and personally, you can't go wrong with either the Japanese or the English version. Lastly, with the overall story, while I can understand why it might not be everyone's cup of tea, I still found it to be very engaging and had many powerful scenes, and if you are able to find a copy of this movie, I would strongly recommend it because I think you would not be disappointed with this movie, and I truly hope that someday another company like Funimation, or heck, even Sentai Filmworks for that matter, will get the license and re-release this film in North America, and I wish someday it will no longer be as obscure as it is now. Well, that concludes my commentary on my review of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. If you want me to do more commentary tracks, I could do more in the future while I am working on whatever I plan my next movie review to be. And with that, I hope to see you all next time when my review of the Avengers is uploaded.